us. I really appreciate your time tonight. And just so you're aware, we will be recording tonight's meeting. If anyone knows Miss Harrington, it looks like her audio has been trying to connect for about 20 minutes. So if you can reach out to her, maybe through text or email and see if there's another way she can connect. I hate for her to miss out on this conversation. My name is Catherine Mahoney. I'm a senior project manager with the Charlotte Planning, Design, and Development team. With us tonight, we also have some other staff members, Gretchen Flores, Erin Henson, and Alicia Osborne. I think one or two of you joined us at lunch this afternoon, but it looks like the majority of you are joining us for the first time tonight. We had a very full conversation at lunch, and so based on how lunch went, we wanted to do things a little differently this evening. Before I do that, though, I wanted to see if you all had a chance to review the informational video that we sent out, maybe around 3 p.m. If I could get maybe just a show of hands, you could raise the hand application or come off mute and say one way or another.
I'm Mark Allen. I did not.
Okay. Looks like Claire was able to. Miss Rhodes didn't. Okay. So it seems like the majority of the people don't have the background knowledge or the background information that we would need you to have before we just opened it up for Q&A. So let me go through our presentation briefly this evening, and then we'll try to get to the mapping exercise sooner than we were able to do this afternoon.
Catherine, if I may, is the video the same as was put out earlier around, or is this a new one?
It is the informational video that aired on October 13th.
Okay.
It's on our project website, and we sent it out this afternoon I think it was like a registration follow-up email.
Well, I saw the one on the 13th. I thought that you were referring to something new, and in the middle of the day wasn't convenient for me.
I totally understand. Well, let me do this. I'll keep it at a high level today, understanding that the majority of people really want to comment on the map. If we have questions, we can always jump back. I'll go ahead and get started. These are our general virtual meeting guidelines. I think most people are familiar with the virtual environment at this point. The number one thing we want to stress this evening is it's really best to participate in the mapping exercise from a desktop. So if you have that chance to switch to a desktop in the next few minutes, that would be advisable. Tonight, we're here to talk about the Charlotte Streets Map and the Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map. We'll provide some general overview information, as I've alluded to, and then spend the majority of our time looking at the draft recommendations for the 2040 policy map. So the main thing to understand about these two maps is the purpose for them. And ultimately, the purpose of the Charlotte Streets Map and the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map is to help implement the vision of the 2040 comprehensive plan. I know the Dilworth community and others in this area were really involved in development of that comprehensive plan. It was adopted by City Council in June of 2021. And now there are some major initiatives listed at the bottom of the screen, all aimed at helping to implement that plan. We'll talk mostly about the 2040 policy map tonight. That map will inform where and how development occurs in our neighborhoods over time. The Charlotte Streets Map will define our multimodal vision for the mobility between the places we live, work, and play. And the Unified Development Ordinance is going to consolidate and update our land development regulations so they're better aligned with the vision of the plan. And these two maps in particular, the Streets Map and the Policy Map, they relate to one another because they both inform how our built environment is going to evolve and change over time. The built environment, as you can see illustrated here, includes land use and transportation related characteristics. So each map is going to provide information about the places we want to create. We'll look a little bit at the Charlotte Streets map and then focus on the 2040 map for the rest of the time. So before looking at the street map itself, it's helpful to understand what a street is. It looks and feels and functions the way it does based on all the components illustrated here on the screen between the building fronts. So everything from the bike and pedestrian amenities to the center lanes and travel lanes, these various components work together to serve all the users along a street. And the street map itself, is going to provide the vision for our future, or the multimodal vision for our future street network. It's important to know that this map is not a project list. This is what we're aspiring to in the future. It's based on a lot of council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last few years. And it ultimately recommends a cross-section for all of Charlotte's arterial streets. And this recommended cross-section is going to support the UDO's zoning districts so that we're building the type of streets that we want to see as development occurs. The online comment application that's available right now allows you to click on an arterial street and review a range of information about that proposed, or the future vision for that street. You can see the cross-section that's recommended, the distance that's the current distance between the curb lines, the type of planting and sidewalk amenities or bike amenities that are proposed, and then an illustration that gives you an idea of what it could look like. The illustration isn't prescriptive. Things might change based on conditions with the future, but ultimately that's the vision for what CDOT wants to accomplish. So you're welcome to explore this map and provide comments on these recommended cross sections between now and November 14th. There's a demonstration video available at the website here posted on the screen, cltgov.me/CLT Future. If you'd like a step-by-step tutorial on how to use the application. And again, CDOT is just really encouraging as many people to participate with that online comment app as possible. So for the rest of the evening, if you have a streets related comment or question, we ask that you'll put that in the chat. We'll be sharing that feedback with our transportation colleagues after this meeting. But for the rest of the time, we really want to focus on the 2040 policy map. So what is the policy map? It is a translation of the comprehensive plan's place-based policies. So there's a lot of guidance in the comprehensive plan, and this mapping effort is really just going to focus on the guidance that talks about where and how development should occur. The importance of this map is that it is going to provide a citywide direction for a number of things. It's going to help us understand how we can balance the needs and opportunities associated with future growth. So through this exercise, we are going to identify where we can accommodate future growth while also protecting our neighborhoods and our green spaces. We're going to identify where we can accommodate growth so that it's aligned with our infrastructure capacity. And then we're also going to identify where we need to improve access to historically underserved areas. That's a key mark of the comprehensive plan to provide better access to goods, jobs, and services in the future. And so a main component of this mapping exercise is understanding where there's low access and how can we improve it in the future. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. It's important to understand that the map is developed using a new tool called place types. This is a classification system for organizing patterns of development. It was talked about widely during the development of the comprehensive plan. And so those colors that you see represented on the screen, they represent a type of development form. And we'll look quickly at a key here in a minute. In terms of the steps listed at the top of the screen, I'll go through those as we look at a series of maps together. but you can just kind of keep in the back of your mind that we've developed this map using 3 key steps. So here's a summary sheet of what each color represents in terms of the type of development. And we have a link that we'll share in the chat box if you want to open this up and keep it as a reference on a separate tab. The place types range in intensity from neighborhood 1 and parks and preserves, our lowest intense places, to regional activity center being the most intense. Neighborhood 1 is it's the yellow color, low density housing. You can see some single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and some accessory dwelling units. The orange color represents a higher density housing place, anything from townhomes to apartment buildings. And there can be some neighborhood supporting services like a coffee shop at the bottom of the apartment building. Neighborhood center, represented by pink, is our small walkable mixed use place. So this is where you could walk, grab some groceries, drop off your laundry, and maybe share a meal with some friends. Jumping over parks and preserves, I'm just going to point out that the community activity center is the next level of intense center. So this is going to be a mid-sized mixed use area with residential, commercial, office, and it needs to be located along transit corridors so it's more accessible to a broader range of people. Jumping back real quick to parks and preserves. These are our larger open spaces. So you don't need to see every small neighborhood park or every small hardscape open space in the city colored green for it to be intended to continue in the future. This green color is really reserved for the larger regional parks or nature preserves. Open space in general is encouraged and will be required as a part of all of these places. The red is our commercial place, more of a car-oriented retail type destination, something that you would typically see along an interstate or major corridors. Campus is a kind of your traditional single institutional user that occupies a large area. It could be associated with a university, hospital, or office park. What's important to know here is that campus, from a place type perspective, still has to relate and connect to its surrounding community. In no way are we encouraging campuses to turn their back on the public space and just operate internally. Innovation mixed use is a new type of place for Charlotte. This is also a vibrant mixed use place, but it has more of a focus on employment than the activity centers. So there can be a range of light manufacturing, research and development, some flex space supported by housing and daily amenities like restaurants. Manufacturing and logistics, represented by purple, is our traditional jobs type place where you can find things like production, manufacturing, and distribution. And then regional activity center, represented by the dark blue, is our largest and most intense mixed use center. The key example or the best example of that would be Uptown in our area. So that's a summary of what the colors represent. And I'm going to save this for later in the presentation. We're here tonight to talk about the South Inner geography, which is roughly bounded Randolph, Route 4, and 77. And the series of maps that I want to take you through are how we got to the 2040 policy map. And after that, I'm going to ask you one value-based question, and then we'll open it up for comments. So the first step in our mapping process was to translate the development that's on the ground today into this new place type tool. And the reason why we did this was we wanted to illustrate for the community how these colors are intended to be applied. We figured comparing what's there today to these colors would be the easiest way for people to understand what they're intended to represent. Within this geography, you can see a lot of yellow, which is our established single family neighborhoods. There's a lot of red along South Boulevard. That's the traditional car-oriented retail that developed, along the 50s and 60s. You also see plenty of purple in this corridor that represents the manufacturing. This has been, a key distribution corridor for a number of years. And then we also see some red along East Boulevard, Moorhead, Providence. The orange is neighborhood 2, so our larger housing stock, maybe apartment buildings or townhomes, large concentrations of townhomes. You see some larger teal sites. These are primarily campus or churches or schools. You'll see later that these are absorbed into the neighborhood 1, meaning they're enveloped in the yellow, because they're recognized as part of that community and shouldn't have to be called out separately to continue in the future. And then we have some blue along the transit line, which represents a mixed use, our most intense mixed use place. And as you all know, this area has really transformed with the opening of the light rail. So the major inputs used to develop this map was our existing land use data and some data that told us about the form of development. The next step in our mapping process was to translate adopted future land use, so policy recommendations from area plans that were adopted since 2010, and zoning into the place type tool. So in terms of area plans, there are the Midtown Moorhead Cherry Plan is the primary plan in this area that has been adopted since 2010. And then a lot of the zoning is reflected throughout the remainder of the area. There are instances where the zoning, we had 100 zoning districts or over 100 zoning districts to translate to 10 place types. So that does not create a one-to-one translation. And in those cases, we used market analysis to inform which place type would most realistically occur in the future. So you can see here how what are some of the significant changes between the first step and the second step. A lot of the commercial was translated to Regional Activity Center along South Boulevard. And that reflects the zoning alignment that took place after the TOD districts were adopted. Another big change is there's some innovation mixed use that was recommended along South Boulevard, and neighborhood center increased significantly as well to reflect the TOD alignment rezoning. So after that second step, we updated the 2040 policy or the adopted policy map with guidance from the 2040 plan. In this area in particular, the key updates are reflected in the second bullet called plan policies. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I just want to let you know that in other parts of town, there was lower access to goods, jobs, and services. And so you can see more predominant changes related to that step in other parts of town. But for tonight, we won't focus on that too much because it's not as relevant to this area. So let's move on to the plan policies. These are the areas that were protected or preserved based on guidance from the 2040 comprehensive plan. So the plan talks about protecting our established neighborhoods. And we were able to bring back these neighborhood 1 assignments in the areas circled in blue, because there's a concentration of 5 or more contiguous single family homes. We also brought back these green spaces, which were zoned R3 or R4, and so they were actually lost on the second map. But we know that they're important to us and we want to protect them in the future. So they were brought back in this step. And then finally, there was a lot of manufacturing and logistics preserved along the transit corridor, because again, the comprehensive plan identified this place as an important job opportunity and something to protect in the future. So these are really the significant changes between the second step and the draft 2040 policy map. As I mentioned, in other parts of the community, significant changes were related to the equitable growth framework steps. But again, because you can see these hashed lines indicate that this area of town is really well served in terms of access to housing diversity, access to goods, and access to jobs. And you also don't see as many environmental impacts in this area. So just know that in other parts of the town, the equitable growth framework steps were more impactful to the proposed map. But for tonight's conversation, I want to go ahead and open up the conversation and let's just talk about what you guys see here in this area. Before I jump there, I'll let you know that from a citywide perspective, this area is expected to accommodate approximately 5% of our housing growth and 5% of the job growth. So with that, I'm going to open it up. I would like to just preface tonight's conversation with the type of feedback that can inform a change to the map. So as I had said in the beginning, this is a citywide map where we are balancing citywide needs and opportunities. So while we can look at specific parcels to illustrate an issue or kind of identify a theme, the city's response to comments have to be applicable citywide. And so we are looking for additional steps that we can add to the methodology so that it is better aligned with the comprehensive plan. Or we're looking for adjustments to the current steps so that our map is more accurate. And it's really going to be on us as staff to try and listen carefully to your input and decipher how that can be translated. But just so you know what we're working with on our end, we're looking for additional citywide steps or adjustments to our current mapping approach. And this, I'm going to skip these two questions because they don't relate to this area as much based on what we've heard. Let me jump back here real quick. I'm sorry, let me find the right slide. And then I'll share my screen again. The value-based question I want to ask you all is about this area here at Park Road. And I guess that's Ideal Way. So one of the main things we heard during lunch was that this area is identified as commercial.
Catherine, if you can share your screen.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Gretchen. That's very helpful.
Yes.
You're seeing it right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So value-based question I want to ask you about is this commercial area here. We heard loud and clear at lunch that it is identified as commercial and should be considered as neighborhood center because it really is that walkable mixed use place where people from the surrounding neighborhoods come over, grab their groceries, dog food, and maybe sit and have a cup of coffee. We've heard a similar suggestion in other parts of the city and consider this to be something we can add to our methodology so that the map is better aligned with the comprehensive plan. And so I'm going to jump here and ask, how important is it to you all that commercial places in this area evolve into a neighborhood activity center? Is this something that's really important to you all? If so, it's something that we can try to incorporate into the methodology. Maddie, or I'm sorry, Erin, can you launch that poll for us? Oh, she's going to do it in the chat. We've had some trouble with our polling. And so if you all will just provide a response ranging from this would be very important to very unimportant to you, that would be helpful. If you tell us that it's not an important addition, I would also appreciate you commenting why. And as you all are commenting, I'll just let you know from a mapping perspective, we would need to assign some criteria to when a commercial place should evolve to neighborhood activity center. And it could be something like it's surrounded by neighborhood 1, neighborhood 2. It's located along a local or minor thoroughfare. So that kind of illustrates how we can take the feedback that we're hearing from you all and apply it to our citywide methodology. Okay, so I think we've heard from a number of people. You're welcome to continue commenting. And I'm going to rely on my team to keep an eye on the questions until I open this up for group conversations. All right. So with that, we will go to the mapping exercise. Gretchen, are you seeing the annotation slide? Oh,
I see your
There we go.
notes
Okay.
there. Yep, there you go.
So how we're going to move through this exercise is we're going to ask that you locate the annotate tool on your toolbar. It might be at the bottom or up at the top of the screen. You'll see a green box that says you are viewing, and there's a drop down menu with annotate. Once you locate that toolbar, if you could select the stamp tool and then the heart icon, we're collecting comments on likes and dislikes, but that's the easiest icon for us to see. So grab that tool, please. And then on this screen, go ahead and start identifying areas that you want to talk about. And it's kind of like a crowdsourced approach. As we see hearts appear on the map, we will ask for comments and questions. So I'm seeing a heart at East Boulevard, some X's, it looks like, along Ideal, some hearts along the periphery of South. All right, let's go ahead and start here near that commercial center off Ideal Way, just to maybe kind of close that conversation since I've opened it and started it. Whomever has made those marks, excuse me. Could you come off mute and talk to us a little bit about how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what revisions or what potential revisions would be needed here?
Hey, this is Paula Pridgeon. I'll speak. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you, Paula.
Okay, awesome. So I have a lot of concerns about the 2100 block of Park Road and the 900 block of Magnolia. I guess I'll first maybe ask a question. Did y'all take into account historic districts and historic landmarks? Because there is an historic landmark at 2144 Park Road, which is a single family residence. Did y'all take into consideration historic districts and historic landmarks and the preservation of those? And just kind of tying that back to like the Comp 2040 plan, I think the number 9 goal there is to retain our identity and charm.
Thank you for that question. That's a good one. So because historic districts do not affect or change the permitted land uses underneath, and because this is essentially a land use map, we do not have historic districts factored into these recommendations. However, with that being said, the regulations of the historic district would still apply to development in the future, regardless of what's approved on this map. So if it's neighborhood 1 or neighborhood 2, if you're still within the historic district, you have to follow their guidelines for single family and multifamily development. And then the historic landmark is protected under its own regulatory tool.
Yeah, I was going to say something too about that block. So
Okay.
if that's possible.
Sure.
So along that block, we have a series of homes that are single family, a couple quads. They're all R8, R5. The Magnolia block is all R8, R5. You know, it's my understanding that this part of the map, because the Dilworth Small Area Plan was not included, would have been informed on existing zoning. But the translation to neighborhood 2 for those parcels doesn't make sense. And I think when we talk about the historic district guidelines superseding what place type would come into play here, we're also talking about market pressures to demolish homes or demolish these properties. And in the state of North Carolina, you can demolish anything after a year. So that's one thing we're trying to prevent is, you know, the pressures of having an incongruent zoning category, which is what would eventually happen after the place type is created later this year. And having someone be encouraged to buy a couple parcels and demolish those properties to build something else, even if it met historic district guidelines.
Okay, let me comment first on your R8 and R5, and then I'll talk to the market pressure comment because I really appreciate that. So the R8 and R5, this might be a little hard to explain without an illustration, but because place types are supposed to be applied at the block level, so they're not parcel specific, we have a step in here where we grouped or conglomerated parcels early in this process to simplify the number of shapes we were working with. And those shapes were conglomerated based on the majority of zoning, or like what was the zoning for the majority of the area. And so in some of these shapes, you will find R8 or R5, but the majority of the shape was potentially R22 or something else. I'm not trying to excuse that. That is an accuracy, a step that we're going to go back and try to improve from an accuracy perspective. We have heard in many instances throughout the city that, you know, there is R8 next to R22, but everything's recommended for N2. So we're going to take a look at that step and try to refine. It's a combination of these shapes that we've made and the zoning. So I hear you. Thank you for calling out the R8, R5. That should have translated to neighborhood 1. In terms of market pressure, I understand what you're saying. If we recommend it for something higher and more intense, our current historic district tools can't really offset that market pressure much beyond a year. I think there's possibly a working group or a conversation that needs to happen based on some lessons learned from the TOD alignment work. Ellen mentioned that earlier today. I think they're seeing some pressures along the perimeter of the TOD districts and how that relates to what's able to be enforced with HDC. So that's a follow-up item based on this afternoon's conversation. So thank you for reiterating that, and we'll have to let you guys know what comes of that.
Hey, Catherine, this is Courtney Buchan, and I think it's really important to be careful with those historic district adjacent areas. So when you talk about the 300, 200 block of East Worthington and some of the areas that really where you have single family homes right adjacent to, you know, regional activity centers and things like that, I think we have to be very, very careful because the impact could be tremendous. And yes, while it may not be directly in the historic district, if it's across the street, the impact is the same.
Yeah, I hear you. And I know that the historic district input was an addition to the TOD mapping methodology. And so we need to circle up with those colleagues of ours, and there's probably a lot of things that we can learn from that previous process that maybe need to be applied here as well.
And Catherine, there's some parts in the UDO, the new zoning districts, that addresses transitions between the intense land uses too. So that's something that we probably would want to kind of keep in context, that the two are working together, that from a land development standpoint, they may not all land in the land use tool, but may be in the UDO part. But we'll double check to make sure that
Well, I
we're
think you have-
closing the gap on those two things.
You have an excellent point, and to follow up on it, though, you talk about the transition. What you have right now is quite literally less than a block, and that doesn't feel like a transition to me.
And one place that it was very surprising, some of the oldest and most historic houses on East Park Avenue, just below Euclid, are all in two, not in one. And we could not figure out how that could have happened. There is one at the end of the block toward Cleveland. There is one condominium, but the rest of the houses on up the street are some of the oldest and most interesting houses. So we were perplexed as to how they became in two.
Yeah, I can't answer that absolutely right now, but I suspect it's a combination again of those shapes that we created and the zoning assumptions or the zoning.
I don't think so with the zoning, because those lots, they are not large. They would be the smaller, what are now perhaps R3, maybe R5. So you need to really take a careful look at that, because that looks like an error.
You said that was Park and Euclid?
Yes.
Okay.
It's between Cleveland and Euclid on East Park.
Catherine, this is Nina Lipton from Olmsted Park. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with Olmsted Park, but we're behind the Lowe's. And all the properties between Winthrop down, it's Lyndhurst, Olmsted Park, Place 2, up to Magnolia and down by Winthrop through there. We're
Do you
one
mind?
community. Here.
Can you grab a heart and kind of like circle it or use your mouse?
There is a heart. It's right behind the Lowe's. There's a heart right there.
Okay, is my mouse on it?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a unified conditional site plan that was improved in like 1988. It's about 11 acres. And right now you have the section of Magnolia Meacham as a neighborhood 2. It's in the darker color. And the rest of the community is neighborhood 1. It's a grave disconnect. There was an enormous amount of work done when the Lowe's property was developed along with Southborough to create that residential edge. And in the interior part along Mather Green and Sumner Green are actually apartments. They're condos now. And we were very innovative rezoning. And I just want to make sure that we're all correctly coded. We have restrictive covenants. We can't change anything in this community. We're all kind of tied in together. And it doesn't make sense to have more intense development just on that one block. I think it's a mistake, possibly. But if you could take a look at that, and if there's any more information I can provide, I've done comments, I've stated a few things, but I really would like, I support everything else the community is saying. I have a lot of concerns over by Kirkwood and the Park Road Center, and there's other inconsistencies, but just as president of this homeowners association, I need to go on record that this needs to be looked at.
I think I read your comment on our online map the other day and was looking at that, and I agree with you.
I did
think
it
it's a
this,
mistake.
yeah, I did it this, yeah.
Is it, what's the zoning, Nina? Is it
Well,
20 R20?
Well, Yeah, we're like a specialized things. It was an R20 MF, and the interior is an UR/3/CD. We are totally functional. We are tied to the hip with the condos and us. We have shared private infrastructure. We have restrictive covenants all over the place. So yeah, and I notice if I look at the properties of the apartment buildings, it shows the state of the rezoning, but it doesn't show ours, but we are unified. So there you are -3/CD, and they came up with an R20 MF, but I can send you the rezoning file. It was all done at once. So yeah, we're tied to the hip. So just let me know if you need anything additional for me to send to you. I've got the subdivision plans, the rezonings, all the administrative amendments, the whole bit.
I think we're okay for now, but I appreciate you commenting both here and on the map.
Okay. Thank you. And then I do want to participate for greater areas as well, but I just needed to go on record for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all you're doing.
Mr. Allen?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for doing this. I'm in particular questioning a little run of homes on the southeast side of Scott as it comes into East Boulevard. I placed a heart there. You have placed this 7-house run, all single family, as N2, and it backs up to a N1 neighborhood. In order for it to be an N2, it's going to put a lot of market pressure for somebody to come in and try to change that N1 so that they can build anything of any size, because it's really not sized with single family lots, current single family homes. It backs right up to the Atrium campus, so there won't be any further N2 type developments down there. The city has always looked at doing the spine between Scott and Kenilworth as a N2 type development. I would encourage that. I think that's a good idea, but to take those 7 homes and make that N2 when it's already single family, it should be N1 to make it all consistent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
yes,
you.
It sounds like that's an oversight probably of the shapes that we created, because if it is 7 contiguous homes, it should be neighborhood 1.
Thank you.
It's Paula Bridging again. And I put this in the chat, but in making sure I understand, but I know that 2100 block of Park Road, I mean, I counted 8 single family homes on the west side of the street.
So again, I'm really not trying to excuse our way out of this, but those large shapes that we created at the beginning of this are probably absorbing zoning from that area. So we'll have to go in and look closely at it.
Okay, thanks.
Catherine, another thing, I'm just listening to the comments. A lot of what we are probably seeing too is just a misalignment of what's on the ground in their current zone. Like a lot of single family homes have higher zoning categories, and that translation in the place type map is causing some errors in the methodology. So we'll fix a lot of that with the new UDO.
Yeah,
so like Mr. Allen was saying about Mr. Allen was saying the 7 rows of homes, they might be zoned for R5 or R8 or something else, when they probably were zoned that way because of lot size and trying to meet the minimum standards. I think a lot of that will be fixed with the zoning alignment with the UDO. But I'm just listening and trying to connect the dots from all the comments about what the bigger issue is, and I think that might be it.
Well,
if I might just say, since you particularly mentioned my name, this run of homes was zoned R22. For some reason, it was R22. It's never been able to support an R22 development. It should have been at most an R5.
So
Yeah.
let me talk to that.
Catherine, can I just step in here for just 1 second and just say this, and then I'll step back. I think it would be really helpful for you to explain to us, if we don't get this right on the map, okay, and we can see there's glitches in the translation, and you're doing an enormous, I mean, my gosh, what are there, 360 miles worth of Charlotte that you're looking at. But Alicia's saying, well, this is something we can handle in the UDO. Now, the disconnect for me when I look at this is, if we don't get the map straightened out, the map gives enormous weight to what should be on that particular property. And the UDO helps to define it. And if there are, widespread rezonings, I mean, basically you've just changed the entire situation for that property about what can be done by right. And so I really appreciate that. I understand how Alicia's thinking about how to kind of tinker with this and flesh it out and handle in the UDO, but don't we have to get the map straightened out first? Because that is what's going to define the UDO's application in each place, or am I wrong?
You're correct in that this map provides the guidance for which zoning district is appropriate in an area. But Alicia is saying that the Unified Development Ordinance has a better and more calibrated range of districts than we currently do today. And so some additional and much needed guidance that we haven't had in the past will be provided by these new zoning districts. Okay. So you're both sharing information that's relevant and correct.
I will just say this, and this is really, really important. And Catherine, I haven't had it. We haven't met. I'm a former planning commissioner, and I think there are a lot of people in this city who really will get very sensitized to the idea of their by right property, definition and what they can do with their property being changed in error. And so I am happy to help in any way I can. We have to get this right, because all the work that Alicia is doing and everybody else on the UDO, which I'm a big supporter of, to be honest, it's a very large disconnect that I really hope, this isn't just some sort of vision anymore. This is much more powerful. I don't view this as past plans with policy recommendations on of land use. I think you intend this to be very, very different and much more powerful. And so I'll just reiterate that I have enormous respect for this project and what you're doing, but we're not doing another Dilworth land use plan, which once it was adopted was changed in a rezoning in a second. I mean, these are different. And I just want to emphasize that starting to look at it that way. And it's very, very important. And I think you have a lot of people who want to help you, identify things, because there's always glitches in this sort of GIS translations. And I'll shut up now, but I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. You're right. I mean, the comprehensive plan 2040 map UDO effort is all aimed at making our tools more effective and better aligned. So this policy map does provide a direct link to the districts, which our previous future land use map did not. I do want to touch upon the 5 contiguous single family homes and Alicia's point about the zoning though. in our step to preserve neighborhood 1, we looked for those opportunities where there were 5 contiguous homes. However, current entitlements supersede that. And so if properties are zoned R22 right now, and we recommend them for neighborhood 1, we're essentially taking away somebody's entitlements. So I really appreciate Alicia pointing that out. We have to balance that preservation with property rights. And so I appreciate you all, calling out these instances of 7 or 8 contiguous homes. We'll look at it, but I needed to add that to the conversation. If the current zoning allows neighborhood 2 development, we cannot, from a citywide perspective, take those entitlements away.
I understood there was
And
going to
Frank
be one
had
more
a-
map. Am I wrong?
I'm sorry, Mr. Gresham.
I understood there was going to be one more map where you had made some corrections before we moved to the UDO. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. This is our first draft. And so we
Right.
are taking comments on what's working, what's not working. And to everyone's point, we know that it needs to be more accurate. We know that this is a first draft and we will go back and make improvements so that it's more accurate.
Well, I was wondering because Alicia was talking about, well, it'll be okay in the UDO. We want to see that second draft first.
You will. It's expected to be.
I misspoke, Mr. Gresham. I didn't mean to imply that we were done or that the UDO would solve all our problems and this meant nothing. That wasn't my intent. I apologize for that. I just was trying to make the connection between the disconnect between the building type, the zoning district, and what we see here today. Just a technical thing I wanted to point out for us to pay attention to and document what you're saying to make changes in how we do the methodology.
Seems
Can I ask, Ms. Lipton, your comment about properties being R22, but in fact cannot be developed with changes in streetscape and other issues. So you're saying that the site constraints prevent it from meeting that existing entitlement potential?
Yes, I mean, you're talking about a lot of properties that, were zoned, I mean, so many years ago. And part of the process that I recall doing on many plans was taking a look at sometimes the zoning really is inconsistent with what's appropriate for that place. And so I hope, as just as much as I want to protect, I'm a firm believer in property rights and entitlements, but when you take a broad brush and just going through and saying, oh, these are R22s, so they have to be neighborhood 2, but they're in a place where that can't be supported. So what's the best way to guide that future development? And I know it's really a tough thing to do when you're doing so much at once, but we do have an awful lot of zonings, existing properties that are zoned with something that can't be done by right. It's just next to impossible. It would be too tall, and maybe it's in a pedscape, or it's next to something else. There's a lot of property rights that are just can't be fully utilized. So I hope this process is a blend of all of that. Does that make sense?
It does. And honestly, I'm a little, well, I don't know. I'm stumped because the analysis for understanding site constraints, that is, I think, beyond the realm of possibility right now.
Well, I guess it's.
I think, Catherine, you might remember that Franklin had a good idea a few weeks ago when we had a conversation with him that we should include in the methodology the building type data. Remember that will help us with finding those properties that had kind of a misalignment between the existing land use and the zoning, say something is zoned for R22, but there's actually a single family home on there. If we had building type data, which is, you know, we have to use what's best available to us, that will help us to identify some of the things you guys are talking about. So that's something that we're going to explore to see if that will help us. So that would get to Nina's point about Olmsted Park being mostly single family or mixed, but because the districts that were available to them at the time, that's what they used to achieve the goal of the development. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, thank you, Franklin. I won't take
Thank
credit
you.
for that.
I do have another question. I know you said that the best example of a regional activity center is Uptown. And we have a good bit of regional activity center that has kind of crossed South Boulevard there, kind of at the edge of our neighborhood. That is a mix of TOD NC and TOD UC. A lot of the NC was kind of hard fought for in the historic district to bring that down. What was the thought process of that being a regional activity center all along there instead of, or I guess, was that informed mostly by the area plan, station area plans, as opposed to a neighborhood activity center or a community activity center?
The regional along that portion of South Boulevard reflects the TOD alignment process, and the regional over community is due to market readiness, essentially. The stations further away from Uptown are less suitable from a market perspective. They could intensify if they are willing to take that risk on, but in that alignment rezoning, we didn't want to align. These were the areas that we thought from a market perspective were most ready for a regional activity center.
I just think we have to be really careful I know from a market readiness perspective, that may seem like it's ready to turn over, but it's also a transition into the neighborhood. And I think we have to be very sensitive to that. And it does include not only historic single family little bungalows, but also landmarks as well that have been zoned as regional activity centers. That'll put a lot of pressure to redevelop those.
Yeah, again, I think we really have to meet with that TOD alignment team, the historic districts team, and the rezoning team to understand some of the unintended consequences from that alignment effort and what can be transferred to this process.
And I had one more question about the campus place types along Moorhead that were not already owned by the hospital or Atrium Health. What was the basis for choosing the campus place type for those properties?
I'd have to go back and look at the actual translation, but quick, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure the Midtown Moorhead Cherry Plan sees that as kind of the mix of employment, like medical supporting place. And so that translated best to our campus place type. And so the campus place type, it encourages a lot of the things that the other places do, good sidewalk, pedestrian connections, bicycle connections, street connections, building form that creates a dynamic public realm, but recognizes that they probably have some just different needs than the other mixed use type places. Is your concern there that it all kind of ends up looking like the hospital?
Yeah, that's kind of a concern. We obviously want that to interface with the neighborhood. We think it's an important part of the neighborhood. I mean, in a campus place type, you can have a gas station. You can't do that in a neighborhood activity center. And some of those properties, I'm not saying that you're gonna have a gas station right behind, one of our neighborhood streets right there off Moorhead, but it's just the difference in the UDO of how this will actually work out. There are different uses allowed in campus than there are in the activity centers.
Yeah, you're right. Alicia, do you know how many districts are proposed for the campus place type so far?
No, I hadn't, not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I hadn't had a chance to read the 600 pages. I'm sorry. I can
mean,
read 3:27, but not 6.
So let me make sure, I think some of the, Mr. Williams, Wilmer has the issue on Westwood Ave, property or zone B2, but are single family homes. Most likely where there was blanket rezoning in the 90s. Okay, so Mr. Williams, looking at the building data, I mean, that is a different scenario in terms of B2 zoning. But I think it's going to have to be kind of evaluated in that neighborhood preservation step.
Yeah,
Where does,
and
sorry.
it's just kind of like the same thing. I mean, I feel like maybe it's not N2, it's not R22 that's trying to be neighborhood 1, but it is something that I think most likely probably was blanket rezoned in the 90s, with the Moorhead area plan or whatever they decided that, Wilmore was going to be industrial wasteland. But there is, it's not 7 homes in a row. There is one random kind of semi-industrial use parcel in the middle of that, but it is in the historic district, and it is primarily single family homes, like on that entire stretch of that road.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
And then CRB, for example, St. Louis Jewish Hospital Complex has a park buffer. Okay, so Courtney, you're kind of calling out the need for a buffer between this campus place and the surrounding single family. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I think it's very difficult if it were to be smack up against single family homes. And that buffer, I think, would ease the transition and frankly allow for development in the buffer area.
Yeah, I need to familiarize myself with the campus zoning districts because to Alicia's point earlier, a lot of them should provide that transition when adjacent to single family neighborhoods. That's part of this alignment effort that, a lot of our current districts don't require that transition. And so the UDO looks to do that better. Right. Needing language about transitional buffers where there's more intense development next to residential. I think that's a general theme that you could see throughout our UDO districts. Well, it's 7 o'clock. I think this has been really helpful. If I had time to summarize everything, I think, historic districts, rezoning, concentrations of single family homes are some of the major concerns in this area. The transitions between more intense and less intense places. So we hear you all. These are things that we'll be looking at. And the second draft map is scheduled to come out early 2022, hopefully January. So what will you be doing between now and then? Maddie, or I'm sorry, I keep calling on the wrong team members. Gretchen or Aaron, will you take a screenshot of the annotated map so I can advance to the next steps?
Yes, give me 2 seconds and I'll do that.
Okay. We're going to finish this series of community conversations that ends on November 9th. We'll have some additional drop-in hours the end of that week. I think it's the 10th, 11th, and 12th. And after that, we will be synthesizing comments and providing responses for how we can address them. And then we'll be doing the work to address the comments and come back out with a second citywide draft in January. There will be another opportunity for public comment as a part of that draft, that second draft release. And then we'll go before council to request their action. Franklin, you had a question?
Yeah, we've been directing a lot of our community to leave comments on the map. I was wondering if and how those comments will be addressed. Will they be addressed individually, or will it be addressed kind of in mass? How will they be addressed?
So we're reviewing them now, but we will respond to them by themes. So a lot of them kind of have to do with, similar to tonight's conversation. How are you addressing historic districts, or how are you addressing transitions? So we're going to collect all those comments, categorize and tag them, and then provide thematic responses.
And I guess will those be some record of that, or will they be that?
Yeah,
planning
what
commission?
we're hoping to do is at the end, we will push back out our comments attached, or our responses attached to the community's comments. So you can go back to where you left a comment and see how we responded.
Thank you.
Ms. Gordon had her hand raised.
It's Paisley, yes.
I'm sorry.
I had a question for you about Queens College. When you said that it was a campus plan, and then, you said it just folded into the in one neighborhood. I've also seen it where some other shopping centers or small neighborhood regional shopping centers have had the same or have been just rolled into the neighborhood one. Supposing those were to be developed at some point in the future, would you have to follow the neighborhood in one, or could you go back with a shopping center or something along those lines?
So campus and commercial would be dealt with differently. So so from a campus perspective, like a church, a school, or a small institutional use, there are regulations that would allow that use to continue and evolve over time within the N1 districts. From a commercial perspective, they are probably allowed to continue under certain conditions. Like today, an old commercial spot within a middle of the neighborhood can continue if it doesn't expand beyond a certain percentage, or intensify more than a certain amount. So I imagine the commercial would be handled in a similar way.
These would be ones that are an existing shopping center that was developed maybe in the 80s and along a major thoroughfare, but it is now in one as opposed to neighborhood center or something along those lines.
Okay. Have you identified that on the comment application?
I have not. The one I picked out is over in South Park. I'll identify it on that one. Somebody else has already done it, but I'll do it too.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lipton?
Catherine, I can't even imagine how you're doing all this, because this is just one small neighborhood. What's really the most efficient if we know, if we can identify a series of properties where there's this disconnect, would it be easier for us to put it in a spreadsheet and send to you? Do you want all the individual comments? And you don't have to answer. I'm just trying to think about how to make this easier for you, because it's a lot of information. So if, just a thought.
We think the comment application, that's our best effort to make it easy to comment on both the place types and the street map. You're welcome to send us an email at CLTfuture2040. Well, Gretchen, Aaron, can you drop that email address in the chat?
I was just typing it in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's getting late, you guys.
You don't know it by heart, Catherine?
There's so many 2040s in our conversations right now. It's hard to keep them all straight. Whatever you're more comfortable with.
I apologize. I can't find my hand raised, so I apologize for barging in on you yet again. Is there, I understand this is place types. What, if any, overlay is there on traffic impact? Because, for example, CDOT has used Dilworth as congestion easing off of the main arteries for a very long time, and that's deliberate. And as you start to add density on these streets where we already are seeing increases in traffic, how is that being factored into some of these discussions where you're putting highly dense place types where the natural impact is for the traffic overflow to come through the areas you're trying to keep as pedestrian? Is that being looked at, or is that just not even germane to this?
No, it is being looked at, and in several facets. So our place type recommendations have been checked against a modeling software to make sure that we are putting our more intense places where they can be supported by infrastructure capacity. and not even new capacity, really trying to align it with existing capacity so that we don't have to build our way out of a situation. And also, the CDOT streets map is out with our recommendations. We are in constant conversation with them about how changes to our map might impact their recommendations and vice versa. So the land use transportation connection is very much alive and being discussed in both of these efforts. And Ms. Lipton, the modeling software also takes into consideration water and stormwater capacity. We've been working with a whole host of interdepartmental partners, stormwater, CDOT, CATS, Housing and Neighborhood Services, to ensure that the recommendations we're putting out there don't impede their program areas or don't create a burden for the services that they're providing. All right, well, with that, I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time and adjourn tonight's meeting. Alicia, is there anything you want to say in closing? I think she's looking for
No, thank you all for participating and having a really robust conversation. I haven't been on many of these, but this is one of the really good ones. We have a lot to take away and to use, and we look forward to continue to talk to you guys about this process.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you all.